Hey everyone, welcome to the Optispan podcast. We've got a fun episode today. I'm joined by Siim Land from Estonia. Siim is a very popular content creator, author, has a YouTube channel that I don't know, how many followers do you have on YouTube now?
It's over 210,000.
Over 210,000. So more than the Optispan podcast does, at least for now. So congratulations on that. Very active in the I guess maybe would you frame it like high performance, longevity, health optimization sort of space?
I mean, I cover a lot of different things that I'm myself most interested in, and longevity, fitness, nutrition, biohacking, those things are what I cover.
Yeah, great. So first of all, thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
It sounds like you're doing a whirlwind tour of the United States. Where were you at before you came up here to Seattle?
I was just in San Francisco, the Wireless Bay conference, where you're going to go as well.
Yeah, I'll be down there in a few weeks to give a talk. How was that?
It was very nice, like a mini university campus, like different houses, different pods, and people just interested in longevity.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, maybe we can start by sort of your journey on how you got here. You said that you do this because you're interested in it yourself. So, how did that evolve and bring you to where you're at today?
Yeah, I got into health and fitness around high school, and back then I was mostly interested in lifting weights, getting leaner, building muscle, and those kind of things. After that, I studied anthropology in university. And during that time, I switched more towards like a preventive health because my grandfather died to colorectal cancer when he was 36.
Wow.
And I just didn't want to fall victim to some sort of a chronic disease myself. And started researching about different topics about health, made a blog back in 2016 or something. And 2017, 2016, I also started my YouTube channel. So just evolved from different topics. In the beginning, it was also about just productivity, stoicism, nutrition, kind of Tim Ferriss style content. But over time, evolved more into longevity topics, and just gotten better at content creation.
And I mean, it's interesting in the way that the sort of longevity movement has evolved over a really short period of time. So, so when do you? I mean, if you remember, when do you first remember starting to think about longevity as its own topic? And again, maybe you could. I think it's interesting to see how different people even view that word. What does that mean to you when you say I'm part of the longevity community?
Right. Yeah. Well, in my opinion, the word longevity more means about like health span and like living healthy for longer, because there's nothing available right now that would like dramatically extend lifespan in humans.
At least that we know about. Yeah.
So like I kind of view them. Yeah. Like longevity is more about like the natural ways of living longer, maybe reaching centenarianhood and adding healthy decades to your life. But like life extension, lifespan extension, that's more about things we might have access to in the future. So the kind of different fields in my view. Although obviously people are involved in both of them, or like a lot of similar people are involved in like both fields. So I got interested in like the longevity side of things, around 8 years ago when I was realizing that I might have some chronic disease in the future and wanting to prevent against that. What I got into more the life extension side of things was maybe around the same time I read like books by Aubrey de Grey and Ray Kurzweil that talk about the longevity escape velocity. And as an anthropologist, I was interested in this idea of what it means for the human species, like what's the next step in the evolution of the human species. And it's just like interested from an ethical side, social side, biological side, and just the science side.
Yeah, so I'm interested, since you brought it up, what your thoughts are on longevity escape velocity. Both, as you sort of said there, I think there's interesting questions around, the ethical aspects of that, what might that mean? That's obviously, extremely speculative. Like, what would it mean for society if we were to achieve that? But maybe we can start with just the more sort of, practical question, which is, where do you fall? I mean, I think Ray Kurzweil still is saying, 5 years, right? We're gonna hit longevity escape velocity in 5 years. I heard Peter Diamandis saw something from him the other day that we're basically there. So, I mean, I've been pretty vocal what I think of that, but I'm interested to know what other people think. So where do you fall sort of in this, debate? Maybe it's a pseudo debate around, are we close to longevity escape velocity? And maybe, I think most people listening probably know what that means, but maybe you can just define the concept as well.
Yeah, so longevity escape velocity means that after a certain time frame or certain time point, every year that goes by, your life expectancy, catches up with that. So you're not aging, or you're not moving closer to your death. You're actually either keeping at the same pace, or even, reducing that speed of aging, or reducing your biological age, however you want to call it. So you're like outpacing death.
Right. So life expectancy increases are faster than chronological time, basically.
Yeah. So you're, thanks to medicine or science, you're kept alive with different things. I think theoretically it's possible, but right now there's nothing that would indicate that we're anywhere close to that, even in like 5 or 10 years. So I'm more of a, I guess, obviously I'm going to be rooting for that and being excited what's going to happen in the next 10 years. But so far, because Aubrey de Grey came up with the concept in 2004
At least
or something,
he popularized it. Other people had been talking about it before Aubrey, but he was the first to really, I think, popularize it.
Yeah, so it was like 20 years ago, but so far there hasn't been like that much progress in it.
I mean, again, I like Aubrey. He's a friend, but I think if you go back and look at even his projections from 20 years ago, like, we have not kept pace with what he was suggesting would happen. And I sort of align with you. I mean, I think I'm rooting for it too. Like, that would be great. I'm all for it. But I haven't seen any evidence that we're getting closer. And I think, if anything, if you look at the basic research results in terms of our ability to increase lifespan, we're not really making a lot of progress on robust life extension. So could there be a breakthrough tomorrow that would change the game? Yeah, I hope it happens. But if we're going to be data driven, there's no data supporting the idea that we're getting close to longevity escape velocity that I see.
There might be a hockey stick phenomenon, but the same with AI. Like 2 years ago, like, no one was really talking about AI, and now it's like you can have like very realistic videos and
that's right. Yeah, I mean, again, if there's advances in longevity science that parallel the advances in AI that we've seen, anything's possible. I think, again, anybody who understands biology is going to be more hesitant to predict that rate of change just because of the complexity of aging biology, but certainly not impossible, right? I sort of view it as, and again, I'd be interested in your take. I sort of view longevity escape velocity as religion. And I mean, so you have to take it on faith because there's no science to support it right now, but that doesn't mean it couldn't happen.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's almost like a complacency as well, that we're gonna have it in 10 years, and kind of creates this complacency that we're just gonna happen eventually. But
and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. So my only real concern with the proponents and I would almost say propaganda around longevity escape velocity is that if and when it doesn't happen, it detracts from the impact that could happen by advances that robustly increase health span. So, I mean, one question for you would be like, what do you see as, if you don't think longevity escape velocity is going to happen in the next, let's just say 15 years, what do you see as a realistic outcome given where we're at now and where you think the application and the science is going?
Yeah, so there are like some mathematical models that do predict that someone will break the record for the longest living person within this century.
Which is like 122 years in a few months. Yeah.
So someone will live to the age of 130 perhaps, and they predict it's like a South Korean woman because they have a
the highest probability of getting out that far.
Yeah. So, I think, like the average life expectancies will increase. Right now the global life expectancy is something like 73.3 or something like that. which is, is brought down by developing countries. In the developed countries, it's, in the 80s, like Norway or Japan and those things, those countries. So I think on average, people across the world will live longer, and people in places like South Korea and Japan, Hong Kong, they will, on average live something like to their 90s, maybe mid 90s, something like that within a few decades.
So I guess the question though is, I mean, you're right. If more people are making it out towards what we would consider currently in the absence of intervention, right? Or let's just say in the absence of non-lifestyle intervention, because we know we can do a lot with lifestyle. If more people are making it out closer to that, just probabilistically, somebody is going to live longer, getting closer to that species maximum, which again, depending on who you ask, is somewhere between 125 and 140 years, right? So totally agree with that. But that doesn't require any advances in our ability to modulate the biology of aging through non-lifestyle interventions, right?
Yeah, because the maximum lifespan, this kind of supposed threshold, hasn't increased over the last few decades, whereas the average lifespan or the average life expectancy has increased.
That's right. And I think you could argue maximum lifespan hasn't increased over the last several millennia.
For sure.
I mean, there were people who lived well into their hundreds, in BC time periods, philosophers and royalty, right? So, so yeah, I think that's exactly right. I guess the question is, will science help us get out beyond that? That's probably a different conversation, but I was just at the Gerophysics conference, and I think the take home, at least from the physicists in that audience, was that it's going to be relatively easy to get people out closer to that 130-year, I mean, relatively easy, 130-year mark, and it's going to be much, much harder in humans to go beyond that. And it's a complicated explanation, but if that's true, then, I think that may also suggest that the longevity escape velocity idea is going to be a heavier lift than the futurists are currently anticipating.
Yeah, there's like a few genetic freaks, for lack of a better word, who will, break the ceiling, but it's not going to apply to the average person. Yeah.
And even there, it's an open question whether or not the genetic variants that would be required to break that ceiling are compatible with life, right? Because at least in mice, the big effect genetic variants, we know if they were in the wild, they just wouldn't survive, right? They can only survive in a very, safe environment. So it's complicated biology, but it's fun to sort of speculate about. So, I mean, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, it's sort of an elephant in the room, right? So we've got me, I'm in my mid-50s, right? I look like I'm in my mid-50s. You look like you're in your 20s, right? I don't know how old you are. So first of all, how old are you actually?
I'm 30.
Okay, so you look great for 30. But I mean, I wonder if you get this, question, and this is not at all meant in any way other than I think people think about it. Like people my age, when they see you on YouTube, they're like, who is this kid talking about longevity? So I wonder how you sort of think about that. Do you get that? How do you respond to that? And a related question I'd be interested in is, what are the demographics of your audience on your channel? Do you know that?
Yeah, I mean, that's, quite often I get asked, like, why are you talking about longevity? First of all, you're so young, like, why do you care in the first place, right? And second of all, wait until you are 50 or 60.
Yeah, right. So, no, don't wait.
and my answer is, I guess it's like both a good thing and a bad thing. Yeah, like if I wouldn't want to like speed run myself to the age of 100 and then start like sharing this information. Like I want to start early because the earlier start, the better trajectory it's predicted to be. And second of all, if the information is correct or if it's like at least I'm being genuine or truthful about it, then it wouldn't matter like what my age is.
Sure.
As long as the information is like based on actual science and the studies out there. So yeah.
And do you have a feel for the demographics of your audience? Do you tend to have a younger audience than?
It's something like most are like 30 to 50. So it's not like very young.
Yeah.
But yeah, like mid-age.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. And again, I agree completely with what you said, that it's really the quality of the content that matters. And I think, having voices in this community that can excite, energize, younger people, right, it is super powerful and beneficial, and I think has had an impact on the growth of the longevity community movement, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, there are some downsides to that if the people energizing and this is not you I'm referring to, but I'm sure our viewers can guess some of the people I'm referring to, but people who energize a more youthful audience are also not particularly scientific or not communicating valid information. So, and I don't have an answer to this. I worry a little bit. I wonder what is the net benefit to that, right?
You know, I don't have like a PhD in longevity science.
Sure.
I have like anthropology degree.
I don't know that anybody does, because I don't think that's an actual PhD at very many places. But
but you know, in general science or whatever it is. But I do have like anthropology degree. I understand like basic science, and you know, I get probably things wrong from time to time, but I try to fix that and update it. But I guess like where I'm coming from is to try to be as accurate and science based, because it's gonna also influence my own behavior. Like
absolutely, and
my
I think
own longevity is at stake here.
yeah. I mean, I want to be clear. I think your content is well researched, and again, we all make mistakes, right? And as long as you're willing to, when you make mistakes, correct the record and admit it and change your opinion based on new data, that's all anyone can really ask. I agree with you completely. You don't need a PhD. I think if you have a lot of experience in the space, you are more likely to have a deeper understanding. But that's true with any field, right? But as long as you're willing to do the homework and try to get to the right answer, I think that's really important. I guess what I was getting at is there are influencers out there who it feels like they don't really want to put in the effort to get it right, and I think can have a big impact by creating enthusiasm, but also communicate misinformation that can harm people. And we can cut this out depending on how it goes. But I'm interested to know, like, I think Brian Johnson's the elephant in the room when it comes to that. So I'm interested to know, what do you think about Brian Johnson's protocols, his impact? And I'll just start with my own opinion. Like, I honestly tried to ignore him for a long time. And I think a lot of what he says, like the basics are all right. And I suspect it would align with what both you and I believe around lifestyle, largely whole foods, right? Limit alcohol consumption or don't drink, don't smoke, exercise regularly. Yes, all true. Should people be going to a secret island and getting gene therapy? I would say no, that's a really bad idea right now. And then he's bashing, rapamycin, which again, that's a longer conversation about, what does the data actually show, other than what he says is completely wrong. It's misinformation. That's my concern. So again, I'd be interested in, I just told you my opinion, so you're welcome to disagree. I'd be interested in your thoughts, because I do worry about where is the positive and the negative, and where are we balancing out here?
I agree that, eating vegetables and exercising, getting sleep, and, having like the lifestyle things in check is, there's going to be less disagreement between people there. But like some of the things might be over exaggerated, some of the claims, so that can like murky the waters a little bit, and make people jump to the wrong conclusions about what is possible with his protocol. First of all, it's not going to make him live past 120, the supplements and the diet and the sleep and those things. So it would be wrong to say that he's on the trajectory of becoming the longest living person or something like that, because I think most people would, or like scientists would agree, that the basic lifestyle and supplements are not going to take you to 120, 130, 140.
Right. And that's if you get everything right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it might take him to like 100 perhaps, if he's also very kind of lucky, if there's luck involved. But it's wrong to say that this the blueprint protocol as it stands right now is something that would extend his lifespan.
And do you think the blueprint protocol per se is the best protocol out there? I guess, how much do you subscribe to?
No, I mean, I guess what is blueprint? Like, I don't think exercise is blueprint. Like, it's more like he applies the blueprint to the general lifestyle, or like brands blueprint as general lifestyle. Whereas in reality, people have been exercising for decades already before. And so I guess So it's not, if people are eating healthy, exercising, they're not following the blueprint protocol. They're just following a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, and again, maybe we can move away from Brian Johnson specifically and just say in general, right? The idea that there's a stack of 100 supplements that has been researched and validated, and people should take 100 of whatever it is. I guess a question would be like, there's a whole realm of gray area, right? So the way I would think about it is there's solid science. Lifestyle fits in the solid science. We know that works. There are some variations in there, but by and large, we know it works.
Yeah.
There's gray area, and I would put a lot of supplements in there. And then there's snake oil, right? And so the snake oil, yes, there are influencers out there just saying stuff that's wrong. That's always going to be the case. But I think most thoughtful, informed people can identify that. How do you navigate the gray area, though? I guess would be the question. Because this is a place where I don't, I really struggle. And I guess what I look for when I'm digesting information from people and how I evaluate somebody's credibility is, especially in the gray area, if they get the facts wrong or if they cherry pick single studies, I tend to lose all respect for them. But how do you sort of navigate that? And where do you draw the line between something you're going to incorporate into your own life or something you're going to talk about for your followers?
Yeah, I guess with the gray area stuff like supplements and things, there will be obviously some clinical trials on different supplements out there, and that depends what the outcome is and how you, I guess, portray it or how do you communicate that result. So if there are like clinical trials on, I don't know, lowering inflammation or lowering blood sugar, but they're in type 2 diabetics and they don't find the effects in normal people, then, it's wrong to say that it's going to like lower inflammation if you're not diabetic. So I guess like the way that you communicate certain outcomes and results matters. I'm not against people taking supplements. I think people can decide however much they want to spend on supplements and how much they think is worthwhile. But if the marketing claims are sometimes not accurate, that what specific condition or what's the effect size would be, I guess that's wrong. But if there are supplements that like magnesium, like there are some studies that might help with sleep, but there's other studies that show that it doesn't have an effect. So if the communication is clear that, it probably works more for people who are deficient in magnesium rather than not.
Sure.
So if the message is that it works in these conditions and not in the other ones, then it's fine, right? But if it's something like you take this supplement stack and you're going to live forever, then that's obviously not right.
Yeah. I guess, I agree. I think, to add a little bit of nuance there, I think there's, where I really try to be thoughtful is around like you and you have a bigger YouTube following than I do, but I think, the people who watch our podcast are very, I think, interested in the space and value science for sure. And so I try very hard to, present, like you were saying, the limitations to the data and the sort of appropriate interpretation. But as people who are out there, better or worse, recognized as experts, and many of the people on YouTube are not experts, I sort of feel like we have an obligation to communicate high quality information to people. And the idea that and I want to give you a chance to expand on this if you'd like to. The idea that people can decide, yes, everybody can decide, but they're relying on us and sometimes people who are giving them bad information to help them make that decision. And so I guess that's where my questions come from is and how much responsibility do we have to correct the misinformation that is being put out there?
Yeah. So I do believe in everyone should have the right to spread misinformation as well. I believe in freedom of speech, right?
Yeah.
And
it's hard.
It would be worse if the social media platforms would regulate these things and fact check things. It would be. It's actually a great opportunity for more fact-based or more fact-based, content creators and scientists to also clear the space, and in so doing, gain visibility that they would otherwise get.
Yeah.
So it's actually very popular to like fact check other people online and make content about it,
Right.
make reaction videos about it, and these videos actually usually do quite well. Like,
yeah, maybe I need to do more of those. I don't know.
Yeah, so like it's a great opportunity to clear the confusion or like fact check or make some.
But does it really? I guess that's the question. I'm not sure it actually does, right? Because the people spreading misinformation continue to gain larger and larger followings and more. So I agree with you about free speech, and I don't have a solution other than, you know, I wish that telling the truth would be more popular than scaring people with lies. And unfortunately, it feels like there's a lot of approaches aimed at creating fear in people around misinformation. This isn't unique to the health space, but I'll just give you an example. I was at a conference a week ago, and you know, a popular internet influencer, a lot of what this person says is accurate, got up there and showed outdated information on hormone replacement therapy in women and scared people in the audience into believing that hormone replacement therapy was going to cause cancer in them.
Right.
And that, I mean, millions of women have been harmed over decades by that misinformation. And we still have popular YouTube health and wellness influencers spreading that garbage. Right. And so, you know, I don't know what the solution is, but it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I guess the problem is also that you have, you know, very authoritative or with a high credibility PhDs or doctors also spreading information that is conflicting with what would be accurate. So then it's like, okay, if the, you know, because yeah, like both sides can do it. So then it's still the answer is still to fight the wrong information with better information.
And I get it. In some cases there's gray area. And I think even hormone replacement therapy, you know, I feel like the consensus has completely shifted to the position that I'm at, which is that for many women, hormone replacement therapy is very beneficial and the risks are very minimal. I think that's what the science says. You can always find a scientist who will claim something's not real. Oh yeah, climate change isn't real. Yeah, you can find a scientist who will say that. 99.9% of them will actually say what the data shows, right? So, but I think there are other areas where, yeah, it's not as black and white and there's legitimate discussion. I love those areas. I think that's where the fun is actually talking about the areas where there's some speculation and you actually need to get to a place of understanding what the data actually shows. My concern is more around the areas where it's really pretty solved or it's completely solved and just stuff that isn't true gets spread.
Yeah.
Again, we're sort of rehashing. I don't know that we're getting anywhere other than maybe it raises more awareness among people that I think the message is the consumer really has to be
careful,
skeptical, maybe, and ask themselves, is this person who I'm listening to really credible? And I guess what I would say is once somebody, you know, lies to you once, they're probably going to lie to you again. So maybe that's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
And, you know, mistakes are different than lies for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also is like comes down to, so like usually what gets very popular on social media is also kind of a specific type of marketing or like has a spin on it. So like it's some sort of boogeyman or some sort of like
fear or exaggeration.
Yeah. So it just like highlights that, okay, you know, what goes viral on social media is also something like that people are interested in or like catches attention and things like that. So it's oftentimes the accurate information can be more dry and more nuanced, right? It's like not black and white, it's in a gray area, like we said.
It's human nature.
It's hard to communicate that in a way that makes people excited or gets them to spread it.
So is your approach to try to kind of do both, right? Make it engaging, exciting, and also accurate and science-based?
Yeah, like I guess make content also that is about like my own personal stuff. So people are just interested in what I do and how do I came to those conclusions and those things. And you can spin certain topics in a way that makes it more interesting. So like recently had a video about taking a creatine, like larger doses, took like 28 grams, which was based on this study where 21 hours of sleep deprivation after that, taking 0.35 grams per kilogram of creatine, which for me is 28 grams.
Okay.
That like counteracted the loss in the cognition from sleep deprivation. So like I did it for a few days, like a week, took this large dose
took
of
28 grams a day for a week.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I also like slept a bit shorter, and I just like reported how I felt. So it was like the topic of the video was like creatine on sleep deprivation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I package it in a way like I megadosed creatine for 28 grams for a week.
Yeah.
Right. So it's more, and it went much more popular than it would have gone if I said what does creatine do to sleep deprivation?
Right.
Right. So you can
Right.
add a little of like a ribbon or a twist to a topic that makes it more interesting.
Yeah. And do you do that all yourself, or do you have people who help you with the marketing side?
I mean, I came up with the topics myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't have any like team behind me. I do have editor. My brother is editing my videos actually. But yeah, it's kind of a skill or a muscle that does develop. Like, how do you make a topic more interesting while being also like accurate and not, I guess, overhyping things.
Right.
And in the video, I just said like, okay, this is how I felt. I got inspired by this study. There are some also other studies that 100 milligrams per kilogram helps with skill performance after sleep deprivation in athletes. So I tried it out myself,
and
this is what I experienced.
A really high dose, right? I mean, typically you do what, 5 grams of creatine a day?
Yeah, so like in some of the meta-analyses on like power and strength, they find that like the optimal dose is somewhere like 100 milligrams per kilogram. So for me, it's like 8 grams per day. It's also dependent on.
Okay, right. If you're 80 kilograms, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's like the loading phase that some people usually do as well. Like bodybuilders do the loading phase. They do like 20 grams for 5 days, and then they go back to 5 grams or something for the rest of the time. So and the idea behind that is that you reach the saturation point where you saturate your muscles with creatine faster in a week. Whereas if you do the maintenance dose, you reach that in a few weeks.
Right.
You'll reach that same point eventually, but with the loading phase, you reach it faster. That's what bodybuilders used to do.
And did you notice anything in your sleep deprivation experiment? What's the take home there?
I did definitely notice, that it counteracted some like drop in cognition, like as in the study.
And how did you assess your cognitive performance? Did you have your wife tell you you're acting like an idiot?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of interesting. Yeah, like I did have like even like slightly elevated mood, a little bit like more energized mood than normal. It also got me like some GI distress or made me nauseous as well a little bit.
Did you take it all at one time, or was it spread throughout the day?
One time, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So like mixed it with water and drank it. I mean, it didn't taste like anything. It tastes like.
But that's a lot of creatine to put in your gut. In
but
one
it
setting.
did make me feel a bit nauseous in the stomach for at least like a few hours. Yeah.
So, all right, so you're not gonna megadose creatine every day going forward.
I mean, I'll take it. Yeah, if I'm ever sleep deprived and I need to have.
What about with the travel? Did you do anything special with the travel and the time zone changes?
I did arrive in actually last weekend already. So I arrived in LA and I had like a conference there as well. So I did take something like 20 grams before the
creatine
speech. Yeah.
Yeah.
To help with like some of the sleep deprivation. Okay. But I also took melatonin in the evening to get better sleep. And in the morning, I got sunlight, did some exercise, consumed caffeine, had breakfast. So those are all these like the Zeitgebers that anchor your circadian rhythm in the morning. So I tried to like in the new time zone, I tried to get a strong signal to the body that it's morning.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think that all makes sense. And my typical approach when I have a trip, then I change a lot of time zones, is really just try to, whatever you have to do to battle through to stay up that first night until the local, like bedtime that you're shooting for. And then, like you said, the next morning, get up, get some light, right? Get some exercise in the morning. And that, I find that usually it does a pretty good job of resetting, but it certainly would be interesting if there are things like creatine that can help amplify that effect.
Yeah.
Cool. So you've written a few books. You had one come out last year, The Longevity Leap, I think is the title. Is there anything you learned from that book, or what are like the take home messages for people and that came out of your process of writing that book?
Yeah, I learned quite a lot, because you're going into all the small details of exercise and diet and different things.
Primarily focused around lifestyle?
Yeah, so it's not gonna cover any like gene editing or any like dramatic life extension technologies. It's more about like how do you extend your healthy lifespan so that you live as long as possible with what we know is generally applicable to longevity. And it had like exercise, diet, a few supplements here and there, but not a lot. Sleep and circadian rhythms, weight loss, circadian rhythms. I covered like heart disease and neurodegeneration, kidney
like
disease.
Major killers.
Yeah, so like what are the major risk factors, like general like blood markers as well, like what is more optimal, at least what we know that is, or typically see that is better for the lower risk. And I guess one of the major things I learned was that like tracking things matters. Like there's a trajectory that we're all heading towards, and if you're not paying attention to those key blood markers, then you really don't know what direction you're heading towards.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you can look in the mirror and see if you're lean, you exercise. It's very likely that your blood markers are also fine,
right.
But there's always like some markers that might not be as optimal. And based on the information I wrote in the book, I've improved a lot of my blood markers or got them in the more optimal range, like just tweaking a small
What
things.
are the key biomarkers that you pay attention to? Just the core 4 or 5. I mean, you can list more if you want to, but what are the things that you think are most relevant, especially for somebody at your age? Like, I think we talk a lot about what are the biomarkers that people in their 50s and 60s should look at.
Right.
Is it the same set? And what do you really think about for your health?
Yeah, so I think hemoglobin A1C is a great marker for assessing your average blood sugar levels. So it's better than just
it's easy, right?
Yeah. So it's gonna be reflecting, what your average blood sugar and what's your risk of diabetes based on that, and heart disease as well. So try to keep that like around 5%, somewhere between 4.8 to 5.2 is kind of my usual range. CRP is a good marker for systemic inflammation. It doesn't like look at all the inflammatory markers, but as a rule of thumb, if your CRP is very low, then your body has like less inflammation compared to if it's like high.
Right.
And usually it's like the lower the better with the CRP. With third one would be like something like ApoB. I think that's a good marker for heart disease risk, and heart disease is something that we would want to pay attention to early in life already, because it takes decades to progress. And if your ApoB is elevated already in youth, then and it stays elevated for that, then your risk of heart disease is predicted to be higher in your 60s or 70s compared to if it's lower from the beginning.
I agree. What do you think about if somebody has high ApoB or dysregulated lipids in their 30s, about imaging, like a coronary angiogram? So I just went and got it clearly a couple of weeks ago, right? Which is the AI on top of the coronary angiogram.
Right.
What do you think about that as an early way to actually assess cardiovascular health? Or is that something that you've looked into or even thought about really?
I think 30 might be, it depends a lot of things, like depends on their risk.
Yeah, that's
profile.
what I was saying. So I think somebody who's got perfect lipids in their 30s probably don't need to worry about it. But if you have high ApoB, would that be a time to see if you've got early plaque buildup or earlier cardiovascular disease?
Yeah, I think like it depends on like family history and what's their, I guess, history of blood work. If they have some history of blood work and it's always been elevated, plus they're diabetic and have high inflammation and high blood pressure and those things, then the risk is quite high even in your 30s if you have a history.
At least relative to everybody else,
Yeah, but at the same time, it's also like, okay, if you get some results, what are you going to do with it? And what are you willing to do? Like, are you going to start taking statins or something else if you have a bad result or something like that? Just getting the information, it's great to see like what's the actual number is for your calcium score, but depends, like what are you going to do with that information as well? Like, are you just going to ignore it or keep following the same thing? Then it's not worth it.
I think that's a really important point. I mean, you could make the same statement about the blood chemistry, but I think that's a really important point. So one thing about the angiogram with contrast, and then clearly on top of that is you see both the hard plaque, which is the calcium, and then the soft plaque as well. But still, if you aren't going to do anything, so you find out you've got plaque buildup, and then you're like, okay, well, now I know that's not helpful.
Yeah.
I guess I would say, I think for most people, seeing it is going to be more likely to modify behavior,
Right.
and behavior both in terms of lifestyle modifications and willingness to take medication if appropriate, than seeing a high ApoB on a blood test.
Yeah.
But you're right, it is still requires action after you get that piece of data.
Yeah. And I guess, yeah, like there's no reason why we would need to wait until your 40s or 50s. Like if you're gonna also take action on it, right?
Yeah. Again, I think, the only downside to that particular test is that there is radiation involved,
yeah.
right? And it's more radiation than you get from like a DEXA, right? So again, is it a significant risk? That's a different discussion, but there is some risk associated with that level of radiation. So any other blood-based biomarkers that rise to the sort of top of your list before I want to talk about DEXA too, since it just came up.
Yeah,
any other blood-based biomarkers?
With the lipids, like Lp(a) is also something that people should measure, like genetically influenced and not a part of like a regular blood panel. So just to see what's your like genetic set point can
and
be
some medications
important.
are not yet really available, but it sounds like in the next few years there will probably be ways to really target both ApoB and Lp(a).
Yeah. So I think like it's just like one of the it's the biggest cause of death for most people, heart disease.
Yeah.
So if you're not really paying attention to the major risk factors, then you might have a bad surprise eventually.
Right? The surprise you don't want. Yeah. So DEXA, where do you stand on DEXA as a tool for monitoring your own health, and why?
Yeah, I think DEXA is great. Like you said, it has a little bit of radiation, but it's not as much. And
less than you got flying to the United States. So.
Yeah, well, that's good. And it's good for looking at your bone density. I think that's the best marker you get from there. So especially postmenopausal women, they would want to know what's their bone density.
Yeah.
But with bone density, it's something that ideally you want to know before that already.
Right. So earlier the sooner you can take action.
Yeah, because it's harder to build muscle than bone density later in life.
And I think, tell me if you agree with this, I think resistance training and eating a high quality diet is the best way to maintain and build bone density. The drugs for osteoporosis are not great and have some unfortunate potential side effects as well.
Yeah, just your everyday activities like lifting a coffee cup or walking the stairs or just regular low intensity activities aren't enough to stimulate the bone growth. So you need something weight bearing exercise to actually do it. And the earlier you start with it, the better it is for your bone density.
What about hormone health? This is something in your 30s you probably don't have to think much about personally, but is it something that you do think about and or talk about in your sort of communications around health span and longevity?
I do think that hormones are very important, and from I guess my own experience as well, if your, let's say, testosterone is like lower, then it's harder to build muscle as well, then it's compared to it's higher. Like if your hormones are optimized, you sleep well, you have, let's say, testosterone somewhere in 800s or something
for men,
or above, then you just build more muscle and you get stronger at the gym more easily compared to if it's like 500. Like if you're very lean.
And you're more likely to have high bone density and be metabolically healthy as well, right?
Yeah, so I think that is very important component to longevity, to maintain metabolic health and good body composition as you get older, with optimal hormone levels, testosterone and estrogen for women as well. I guess the question is like, will like hormone replacement therapy or TRT or something like that, will it have like life extension effects or something like that's up to debate. But I do think that it will extend the healthy window, and I think most people will benefit from some aspects of hormone therapies once their natural production has declined a lot. Yeah.
And in women, we know 100% of women are going to have their natural production decline. And in men, I don't know exactly what the percentages are, but it's a pretty high percentage that probably fall into a suboptimal range at some point in their life. Great. So I think at one point, I saw it was either a post or something from you where you sort of, listed a small number of things that really move the needle. And so for in your own life, like what are the lessons you've learned? Like these are the things everybody should be thinking about doing that are going to have the biggest impact on their health span.
Yeah. Obviously, exercise regularly. That's helps to maintain good metabolic health, helps to improve all the blood markers typically.
And with exercise, where do you fall between, like zone 2, low intensity, HIIT, resistance training? Like what are, we don't need to get like into your detailed protocol unless you want to, but like in general for the typical person, like where would you sort of point them?
Yeah, you want to do a mix of cardio and weights. That's what the research says, that the combination is better than one or the other alone.
Yeah.
And there was a recent analysis, I think 2 years ago, that looked at a few, like over the last 10 years, the major studies in the field, and they found that with like high intensity exercise, there's a sweet spot of how much is optimal. Like too little obviously is bad, but too much, if you do like 300 minutes, 400 minutes of high intensity exercise per week, then it's going to actually give diminishing returns.
Do you have a feel for how people can know if they're overtraining? Like what are the signs to watch out for? Any tools that can be used?
Yeah, like sleep
quality.
Sleep quality is worse. HRV goes down from your normal baseline.
What would you view as the best way to track HRV?
I think like the sleep trackers are typically pretty good at it, like Oura, Whoop, and these others. They get the heart rate and HRV quite well.
Is there one that you feel is better than the other? You really think any of them can really do the job? And I don't know if you have endorsements, so if you do, disclose those. But I'm just interested to know sort of what people's opinions are on the various devices that are out there.
I'm not like sponsored by any of them, but Oura I think is one of the better ones for sleep. At least I've seen some data that it has one of the like highest correlations with the 3 stages of sleep, like with awake, light sleep, and either deep or REM sleep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the Oura is one of the best ones, and it's also convenient. If your HRV goes lower from your baseline, so everyone has like a baseline HRV, what's normal for them, and it's kind of different. Mine is like over 100 usually. For some other people, it might be 60, 45, whatever it is. But if it goes lower than your normal, then that's usually a sign of like you're getting some infection, you're overtrained, or just getting worn out by something. So rapid declines in HRV is usually a sign of like some overtraining. But yeah, like you can cultivate this resilience. I can train a lot more than the average person probably, and longer.
Sure.
And it's not going to affect my HRV and things like that in a negative way. Whereas a sedentary person, if they go for a 10K run or something, they're gonna it's a
process of getting into better shape where you can increase the load of exercise that you're doing.
Yeah, but the idea is that excess high intensity exercise probably has like diminishing returns.
Yeah.
Whereas that analysis that I mentioned, they found with moderate intensity exercise, there was like a linear association with lower mortality risk. That if you did 900 minutes of moderate
and by moderate,
activity,
you're talking zone 2, zone 1, zone 2, walking.
They categorize it as 40 to 60% of your max heart rate. So brisk walking, hiking, simple jogging.
So if your max heart rate is 180, we're talking around 90 plus or minus 10.
Yeah. So like moderate activity you can do for a lot longer without it jeopardizing your recovery and without causing more like, I guess, wear and tear on the body. Whereas with too much vigorous exercise, this it potentially has like negative side effects down the line, in my opinion.
As much moderate exercise as you can fit into your schedule, some level of high intensity exercise frequency.
Yeah, I do like 3 times a week weightlifting and once a week high intensity interval training.
What do you do for interval training? What does that look like?
I usually something at least 2-minute intervals up to 4-minute intervals. So I do 2 minutes, all out at 80 to 90, 95% max heart rate. Rest for 3, or depends on how long the interval is. If it's 2 to 4 minutes, that the rest is also like matching that duration, and then a few rounds. I try to get like 20 to 30 minutes of in the intensity zone.
I see.
Per week.
Okay. And people should probably build up to that. Again, if you're sedentary, you don't want to start right trying to go to that.
Short intervals in the beginning is better than, but the research suggests that longer intervals are better for the VO2 max. So like if it's over 2.5 minutes, then it's better than 30-second interval.
Right.
So
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm a little bit less convinced. Peter Attia is a friend of mine. I'm a little bit less convinced than he seems to be that VO2 max is the be all end all, right? I think people who have a high in other words, I guess what I'm saying is I don't know that training for VO2 max optimization is necessarily going to optimize your mortality risk. I think people who have a very high VO2 max, of course, have been training at that level. Right. But I understand what you're saying. I guess I'm personally not sure that that's exactly what we want to be doing. I think more generally getting into, like you said, 80-90% of max heart rate for some period of time, maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, if you can work up to that, makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would, personally, I don't try to be real rigid and say, I'm going to do everything I can to get my VO2 max up.
Yeah. But with VO2 max and muscle strength and muscle mass as well, like, what gives you the optimal risk reduction or the lowest risk?
Association.
Association. Is not like that elite level as some people might think. Like if Peter Attia says the people with the highest VO2 max have the lowest mortality, then he's referencing this study where the lowest mortality risk was associated with a VO2 max of like 50, which isn't like,
the highest elite.
It's not like,
I guess we probably don't know, right?
Yeah.
But I think your point, which is true, is that at least for many aspects of intense exercise, there is a point, certainly of diminishing returns, and probably a point where it actually becomes less than optimal. Yeah.
So
particularly if you're putting wear and tear on your body and messing with your joints and your tendons and ligaments and all of that. I'll just say again, I think also finding a way to do zone training that works for you is really important. So like it sounds like you've got it dialed in, you've got a way to do it. I think there are a variety of ways you can do that. One thing that I like to do with my wife when the weather's nice is there's a set of like 140 stairs, right? And so you can go up, your heart rate gets really high by the time you get to the top, and then you have a low intensity down, and just do that 10, 12 times.
Yeah.
It's a nice way outside to get, maybe it's not the optimal interval training, but it definitely gets your heart rate up and has an impact.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely doing it in a more meticulous way than is necessary, probably.
Well, I mean, again, I think you just do what works for you, right? And some people are for some people, having a very, structured, meticulous program is exactly what works for them. And for other people, it's not.
Yeah.
Right?
There's also research about these exercise snacks where you do like a 1 to 2 minute high intensity break where you're like, run up the stairs or do jumping jacks, whatever it is, for 1 to 2 minutes. That also increases VO2 max in like office workers.
Right.
So
especially
you can get away with
from a low level, right? Yeah, absolutely.
So do those a few times a day, and you're gonna get like improvements.
Good tip. Okay, so exercise. What else?
I think a more like leaner body composition is important. So
however you can get there.
Yeah. So like there's different ways to reach that. Exercise probably is a contributor for most people. Diet is very important in a lot of ways. Like what you eat directly influences your body composition and how much you eat. I think like with diet, there's so many like different opinions out there, and it's very hard to come to conclusions with diet because it's hard to track, and it's depends a lot on individuals as well.
But is it though? I mean, aren't there some general principles?
Like there's a general principles. Yeah. Like,
what are the general principles before we get into the weeds?
General principles are like, eat mostly whole foods. I think like omnivorous diet is the best, maybe like a more Mediterranean style for the like, if you want to be more safe. But I guess the point is also that if you are eating the healthiest, purest organic Mediterranean diet, but you're eating too many calories, then it's going to have negative effects on your health. So.
I'm glad you said that, because I actually like it's a very simplistic framework, and I like to ask people sort of where they land. I think in the longevity space, right, when you talk about diet, again, from a general principles perspective, you can break it down to what you eat, when you eat, and how much you eat, right? So how do you rank those three? What are the relative importance of those three in your mind? What you eat, so you would say like quality of diet, right? How much you eat, total calories, and when you eat, time restricted eating, that kind of thing. What's the relative importance? And maybe they're all important, but what's the relative importance?
I think like what you eat is probably most important, because if you eat, like a very whole foods, healthy diet, then it's hard to get like a BMI of 35.
Yeah. So you're saying they're connected, which is true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. But
Yeah.
let's pretend they aren't for a minute.
For health purposes, how much you eat is probably like the number one thing that matters. But like if you eat a whole foods diet, then you might have like a few extra pounds, right? You might have few percentage extra body fat, but you're not going to become clinically obese with a whole foods diet in most cases.
Right.
But if like everything is just looking at the concepts, then how much you eat is the number one thing, then what you eat, and then when you eat is the least important.
Yeah, I agree completely. And part of the reason why I like to do that exercise is I think if you listen to people on the internet, you hear a lot about when you eat, time restricted eating, fasting, all of that. And again, those I think are useful ways to control what you eat, or I mean, how much you eat. But in and of itself, I think that's probably the least important of the three.
Right.
And I actually put them like how much you eat and what you eat are really close together in importance.
Right.
And then when you eat is down the list a ways, in my personal view.
Yeah.
So I like to do it that way because I think there's this misperception that time restricted eating just like solves all the problems. And it doesn't if you're eating a crappy diet and eating too much. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I do intermittent fasting. I've been doing it for like 10 years. I like it. It's a great way to control calorie intake. It helps with sleep in some aspects if you don't eat too late. For some people, it's like magical. Like it helps them to lose weight.
Right.
It helps them to control the calories and get good sleep. For others, it can be worse. Like they feel low energy, they feel low testosterone, whatever it is. So it's very individualized of the intermittent fasting component. But I think maybe here...
And how long the fasts are, right? Plays a big role.
Yeah, and I think here are also like some general rules of thumb that, you don't want to eat immediately before bed, and you want to have some like confinement in your window, but you don't need to have, like I need to fast exactly until 12 before I eat.
and there are, outside of the just nutritional component, there are circadian impacts to snacking throughout the night. And I saw an interesting talk by Sachin Panda when I was in India recently, and both the impact on circadian rhythm if you're snacking throughout the night, but also he showed pretty compelling data that when people eat after 2 p.m. or 2 a.m., so they've been up and they're eating, they generally eat low quality stuff, right? So there's it gets back to these things are connected to each other in complex ways because humans are complex social animals.
But what do you think, like if there are is like the exact same amount of calories, the exact same diet, macros and everything is matched, but one group eats like let's say 16 and 8 versus 24-hour throughout like snacks.
Right. I mean, I guess I would say if it was a true 24-hour, like you had an IV drip that got them the same calories that 24 hours. Yeah, I suspect there would be a beneficial difference to shrinking. I think nobody really does that. And so I think the data I've seen suggests there's really no effect from intermittent fasting if the quality of the diet is and calorie intake is controlled for. And I would say particularly it's a appropriate quantity and quality of diet. My guess is for most people, the shrinking the window is going to have a small to negligible impact. But for some people, it could still be very beneficial, right? So it's going to be, I think the time restricted part is more individual than eating too much, which is probably bad for everyone. Of course, what too much is going to be individual. But if you're excess calories and gaining adipose, particularly visceral adipose, that's probably not good for anybody or very, very few people, right? So I think that the how much is much more general, as is the quality of the diet. So getting back to quality though, so generally whole foods, generally avoid highly processed foods. Where do you land on protein? I think this is another topic where there's differences of opinions. I think legitimate differences of opinions. So I'm interested to know kind of where you fall and why.
Yeah, so I've always kind of followed the higher protein diet since lifting weights. And I've actually reduced my protein slightly over the last 2 years, mostly because I've seen that it doesn't jeopardize muscle mass and muscle strength. Like I can get away with much less protein than I previously thought. That's the main,
to maintain or continue to build muscle.
So, and I actually built muscle on a lower protein diet with DEXA scans showing that.
And what do you now consider when you say lower protein? Where does that fall? Just so people, because I think low protein means different things to different people, right? It's a relative sort of descriptor.
So right now I'm eating like 0.6 to 0.7 grams, or I think more like 0.7 to 0.8. So somewhere between there. It's not like the same on every days.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, it might have been closer to 1 gram per pound.
Is that per pound?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So for me, I'm 80 kilos, so I'm like 130 grams of protein, somewhere around there. Whereas in the past, it was like 160.
Still, I mean, much higher than the RDA, right? So again,
For sure.
I think this is interesting, right? Because again, different people, when they hear low protein, are going to think, much,
so it's not low protein. Yeah, it's
but lower than you were eating before.
Yeah. It's lower than bro diet, like a bodybuilder bro diet.
Right. Yeah, bro diet. Right. And have you noticed anything? I mean, you did that intentionally, I assume. Have you noticed anything in terms of satiety, energy? You said your body composition has actually gotten better, which is interesting.
Yeah. So I built like 200
total calories go down when you lowered the protein in your diet, or do you know?
It's around the same. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So I reduced some of the protein, increased fiber, and increased carbohydrate intake, and reduced some of the fat. So I went from like quite high carb right now, so like 300 grams of carbs or something.
Mostly complex carbs, I assume.
Yeah. Sweet potatoes, those things. I built like 200 grams of lean appendicular muscle mass, so in the arms and legs, which was surprising for me as well. I thought I was going to lose muscle because of eating less. Yeah. But maybe it was the carbohydrates that enabled greater intensity at the training, or maybe the insulin has also anabolic effects.
Sure.
So something maybe along those lines. But yeah, like I don't need as much protein as I previously thought.
Right.
How I feel, because I'm eating more fiber and more plants and stuff, I feel very satiated. Like it's actually easier to diet, interestingly, than in the past. So I'm just like staying much leaner more easily.
Cool.
By doing.
Well, thanks for sharing, because I think this is important for people to hear. Again, you get the misconception that more and higher protein is better for muscle, and you're going to be full all the time. And again, it's very individual. And like you said, I think if you're eating a really high quality diet, a lot of whole plant-based food, you're going to have a lot of fiber, you're going to be satiated, and maybe that's actually better for a lot of people in terms of body composition.
Yeah, I think like fiber is quite like underrated actually. Like there's been a negative idea about fiber for a few years, but I
haven't really heard that, so I'm interested that you say that.
Like, it's a lot more like animal-based dieters say like fiber is
like in some of the
free.
pop stuff, right?
Yeah.
I haven't heard anybody say fiber's bad for you. Maybe they are, but if they are, I'd be like, I don't know, I'd question that.
Yeah, but some people say it's at least unessential. It's not essential.
Right,
but I've seen that maybe it's not essential, but my blood work has gotten a lot better, and body composition is also improving. So
I would agree completely. I think fiber is underappreciated how impactful and important it can be for
gut health is better.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty good. Anything else about diet that we didn't cover that you think is super important?
I guess like you don't need to be like super strict with it all the time. Like if you eat birthday cake every once in a while, or have something that is not healthy, every once in a while it's going to be fine. Like it's not going to long term. Right.
Don't beat yourself up about it. Right. Maybe even take a cheat meal or even a cheat day once in a while. Where do you stand on getting your calories from liquid?
I try to consume no liquid calories. Maybe milk and coffee or something like that. That's fine. But I'm not drinking like juices or sodas or those kind of things on a regular basis. I do think that like maybe fresh orange juice, fresh pomegranate juice, fresh grape juice.
Yeah, I think fresh without added sugar is the key.
They can be fine in moderation, but you don't want to drink gallons of it every day. So
no, I agree completely. Except I drink my coffee black. But I agree with that principle, and I think generally trying to avoid getting calories from liquid is a good strategy, and knowing whether or not the liquids you're consuming have calories you definitely should know that. I think a lot of people maybe don't. Okay, so sleep. What's your strategies around sleep?
Yeah, sleep is very important. In the past, in my early 20s, I restricted my sleep a bit more for studying purposes or working and those kind of things. I also did like what's the polyphasic sleep schedule. So like I slept 4 hours throughout the 24-hour period.
Oh gosh.
In different naps.
Yeah.
I did it for like 100 days.
Intentionally?
Yeah.
You were just trying it out.
I was just trying it out. Okay. But I think, it's obviously not healthy in the long term.
Yeah.
and getting something like 7-8 hours is what most people would need. And
is that what you typically shoot for and achieve?
Yeah. On some days, if I'm tired from exercise, I'll even like 9 hours. But 7-8 hours is what I just naturally wake up. Like I don't use an alarm clock. I just fall asleep within a few minutes when going to bed, and that's what my body naturally kind of gravitates towards. I guess like the regularity is a bit more also like very important. So like going to bed around the same time, waking up around the same time. I find that the sleep quality is just a lot better if I'm going to bed around like plus minus 30 minutes the same time.
Great. Alcohol. Where do you land on alcohol?
I don't consume any alcohol. I haven't drank for like 10 years.
That for health purposes?
I just didn't. It didn't resonate with me anymore. I drank maybe like in our wedding with my wife. I drank maybe like 1-2 glasses of wine, but that's pretty much it. I think that very small amounts of alcohol are probably fine. Again, like if you have a few drinks per week, ideally like spread out, not like 4 drinks in one night is worse than 4 drinks every other night. Like if you drink like a glass of wine for dinner a few times a week, then it probably has like no significant health impacts, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I think I generally align with that as well. I think it's interesting because I feel like in certain circles, there's this movement towards, alcohol is the devil, alcohol is bad, completely don't drink alcohol. I sort of think you're right that, moderate and really moderate, not US sized drinks, right? But international sized drinks, maybe a few a week is probably not net harmful.
Yeah.
Other than it is sort of empty calories. But many people have a hard time sticking to moderate consumption.
Yeah, and it might be a pro-social thing. Maybe it helps with that.
Again, the data is a little bit ambiguous, but and you'll hear people argue that all the data that showed moderate consumption of alcohol was beneficial was flawed, and it wasn't. I think you can point to limitations in any epidemiological data. I actually think the newer interpretations of that data by what appear to me to be people who have come in with an interest in claiming that alcohol is always bad is more flawed than the original interpretations. But I think the data is pretty clear, at least for all-cause mortality. There's a little bit of a dip at moderate consumption of alcohol, and it might be because of what you were just saying, the social sort of component there. Could be if you drink the alcohol at lunch as opposed to at dinner. There's all sorts of possibilities, but in any case, more than moderate consumption is bad. And if you're overweight, it's empty calories that don't really do anything.
Yeah, or if you have like my take. Fatty liver or visceral fat, then get rid of it.
Yeah. Okay. Anything around lifestyle we haven't touched on that you would put in that, like everybody should think about this bucket?
I guess like the social component is very important. Like finding a partner or having just family and friends or a pet even, like just having some social element, it's gonna improve your mental health obviously, but in so doing you might improve you will have a rub-off effect on your physical health as well.
Right.
Like less cortisol, lower heart rate, higher HRV. I think the quality of life will certainly be much better as well.
Yeah. And where do you stand? Because, we sort of at Optispan, we sort of put the social human connection piece and individual connection, what some people will call mindfulness, under a single connect pillar. Where do you stand on that component? Like what people would call mindfulness or sense of purpose, and how do you think about that? And is that an important part of your lifestyle bucket? I guess I would say.
I don't do any like meditation or mindfulness practice myself. I do have like a purpose or some like goals and meaning. I find meaning in what I do.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe that is like a driving force that also has pro health effects. Obviously, it motivates me to do healthy behaviors.
Right.
And mindfulness and meditation has a lot of health benefits as well. It can help with stress and sleep and anxiety and mental health issues. But I guess you probably can't meditate yourself to to the same effects that you would get from social interactions. Like you need some of that social element.
Absolutely.
As well.
Yeah, I certainly would never suggest that it should replace
Yeah.
human connection. And I mean, again, it's interesting. It seems like we align on almost everything because I'm sort of like you. It sounds like where I don't personally do any meditation or mindfulness practices, but I have always felt like I have a pretty strong sense of purpose and motivation and feel pretty grounded in my own life. So again, it's a very personal thing, but I think for people who don't have that, then like you said, and again, you mentioned stress. I think that's kind of the thread that weaves throughout maybe all of the pillars of health, right? Is if you're perturbed in any of the pillars, that's going to increase your stress levels, and that has a negative impact on
being on like negative relationships is probably worse than
that's
not
true.
being in.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I think you're right. I think that absolutely having troubled relationships can create stress as well. Yeah. Maybe we need to say it's about more than just having relationships. It's about having healthy human relationships. But we are, for better or worse, humans are pack animals, and I think we benefit from being around other humans and having common purpose and core values and things like that. Okay, so just a couple more things I wanted to touch on. So one of the things I think where you and I may have a difference of opinion is around the sort of biological age clocks. I've seen you talk about, your own biological age clock measurements. So I'd be interested to know sort of where you stand on the use of these clocks. And, if you want to, we can differentiate the sort of research use and the consumer use. But do you use those in your own sort of approach to health? And if so, how and why?
I use them. So this is speed of aging test. I did that test mostly for
the Dunedin pace, right?
Yeah. I used it for the leaderboard, the Rejuvenation Olympics. But over the last few months or so, I've become more skeptical about them because of seeing a lot of like discrepancies, and your video of comparing these different clocks at the same time, getting different results. It just kind of highlights the unpredictability and randomness from these tests.
At least the ones that are on the consumer market.
So it's like hard to make any conclusions or interpretations about your health from these tests. At least, and from my own experience as well. Like I do a test, my blood work is great, but I have like some cold or infection, and my speed of aging goes very high. Like my blood work is generally very good. I'm not actually feeling sick, but there might be something underlying sickness.
And let me ask you, when you say that, so it's interesting that you say that for a couple of reasons. When that has happened, do you know that you had a cold or infection, or is that like just a possible explanation for the what seems to be an aberrant sort of result?
Well, for example, I did in 1.5 years ago or something, I did after COVID, but it was like 2 months after COVID, so I wasn't any sickness anymore. So it was my worst result, and then a few months later I tested again. It was normal. So it was like almost took an entire year after COVID for it to normalize what it was before COVID.
And did you test multiple times in that time period, or there was just that one and then
the next one? I did it. So like 2 months before COVID, 1 month after COVID, 2 months after COVID, and then 5-6 months after COVID. So I mean, they're quite expensive, so they're not going to be
that's another problem, right?
Something to do every month.
So let me give you I'm put my scientist hat on now, because one thing scientists always do is we look for alternative explanations, right? So my alternative explanation to that is that it had nothing to do with COVID. It's just noise in the test, right? Maybe. I think this is the problem. One of the problems I see with the way these biological age tests get talked about on social media and YouTube is you can always make up an explanation for why you got an incorrect result. But it might just be an incorrect result, right? So this is why I think we just need to be careful. I think the assumption built in to trying to explain it by COVID is that the test is actually measuring something biologically relevant. And why do you believe that? You believe it because the company told you to believe it, right?
Right. I think they say it like it's just it is what it is, but
right. That's what I mean. There's no good reason to believe that they actually did the test properly. Maybe they did. Maybe they did. So I just think it's useful for people to recognize that we try to put explanations to explain the variation in these tests where there's not really any good evidence that that's the actual explanation. We're trying to fit it in to the idea that these tests actually measure something relevant, and we don't know if that's true. And I would suggest that the little data that we've got now from the self-experiment I did are that even if they're measuring something relevant, there's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
And the Dunedin pace is an interesting one because that's, in theory, supposed to measure your rate of aging, right? So I took the same test 4 or 5 or 6 times over about a 2.5-year period, and my biological age was going up and down and up and down and up and down.
Wow.
My Dunedin pace, the rate of aging, which should have been the slope of that, was always below 1. So even within the same company's test, it doesn't match. The two don't match up with each other.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So I'm not like a believer in them in that sense that they're very noisy and a lot of even if the result is accurate, let's presume it would be that you get this result, whatever the number is, you would still keep doing the same thing, right?
Yeah,
you still keep doing the exercise and getting the diet, sleeping.
I think that's how they could be useful, right? That's what everybody hoped, was that if the Dunedin pace was accurate, and again, we should be careful. The Dunedin pace algorithm is an algorithm that was developed in a academic research study. It is correlated with health outcomes. That is true. What is actually being measured in companies that are selling you the test, nobody knows. They say they're using that algorithm.
Right.
Are they doing that? Are they doing it well? Nobody knows. So as a research tool, interesting, potentially very powerful. As a consumer-facing product, unregulated, unvalidated, nobody knows. Yeah. But if it did work, then you could say, okay, I'm going to take the test, I'm going to get my rate of aging, and then I'm going to eat healthy and exercise. And if it goes down, I know it's working for me. That would be the hope, right? And I think that's how we want to use these things. I just don't think we can right now. I think you're better off using other biomarkers that are more validated.
Regular blood markers are
or
much
how
more
you
accurate.
feel, or how much weight you can lift. You know?
So not very excited about them.
Okay. All right. Sorry to put you on the spot, but it's become a
no, it's good
peeve of mine.
because it has changed, I've become more aware of the flaws over time.
Yeah, me too, right? So I think this is exactly kind of one of the things we started out with, which is that as you get more data, maybe your enthusiasm for certain things or your opinion changes. Okay. So last thing I want to ask you about. So your wife has also a podcast channel and is a content creator in this space. I've done Inca is how you pronounce your name, is that right? I've done Inca's podcast. She's great. But the question I've got for you, is there anything that the two of you disagree on in health or longevity? And I ask because my wife's done research in aging as well for many years and is widely read, and we disagree sometimes, and almost always she's right. I come around to her opinion, but I'm interested to know, is there anything that you guys disagree on that you're willing to share?
Right. I guess we do agree on with almost everything, and we have like a very similar lifestyles. We exercise and we go to bed at the same time, and those things. Maybe one thing that, or at least we've, I guess, matched more over time, is the idea of like certain foods not suiting other people. Like she has more gut issues and more autoimmune issues from just genetics or like childhood. And I guess I'm more warmed up to the idea that there is a lot more problems with like plant toxins or like certain chemicals that don't suit everyone for various reasons.
More people are going to be sensitive to certain foods, and
whereas maybe initially I might have been a bit more less warmed up to that idea.
Great. Thanks for sharing. I can relate to that as well. This has been a lot of fun. Anything we didn't talk about that you want to make sure we hit on?
No, I think we covered everything.
Great. You want to tell our viewers where they can find you if they don't already know?
Yeah, it's Siim Land on YouTube and Instagram. And that's pretty much on all the platforms.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming by. This has been really interesting. And thank you all for joining us. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time on the Optispan podcast.